press royalist teletype system that I was able to study out long before we put it in operation. And they sent a civilian technician over to train me in the operation of it. And come to find out, I knew a lot more about it than he did. Because I had studied that thing for hours and knew exactly how it worked.
That's great.
So there's your mother, and there's her father.
So he could have saved his time.
And it was that experience that got you started in radio, right?
No, I started in radio as a teenager, well, probably 14, 15 years old.
Crystal radios.
Yeah, I built crystal radios. I took a correspondence course from Devry Radio Institute. And they had, I don't know how many lessons, but I completed the basic 60 lessons. And then they got me a job at Zenith Radio in Chicago. So I moved from my little town of 500 people to the city of Chicago. It was a rather radical change for me. And one of the odd experiences that I had at Zenith was when I first was hired on, my job was inspecting solder joints on an assembly line building automobile radios. And they came by so fast you could hardly count them, so much less inspecting any joints. And that certainly wasn't the idea that I had radio technology, because by that time I had a reasonably good knowledge of basic radio, and I was kind of unhappy with the job. This one morning I came into work, sat down at my assembly line, and I felt a tap on my shoulder. And my boss, a fellow by the name of Jim, a young fellow, probably 25 years old, real husky, he says, "Ron, come with me." He says, "We got a new job for you." So they led me to a different part of the plant that was called the graveyard. I had heard about it, but I'd never been there. And he leads me up to the front of the room. Actually, it's a very large room. And across several lines, and then down one line. And he introduces me to a fellow, a Polish boy by the name of Joe. He said, "Joe's going to teach you how to do the alignment on the radios before they go into the cabinet. That's the last thing they do before they go into the cabinet." Well, this is something more like what I was looking for. And that was the dream. And normally dreams you forget when you wake up, but this one remained in my memory in exact detail. So when I went to breakfast that morning in the company cafeteria, I was telling the guys about this dream I had last night. And they said, "Yeah, you really were dreaming." Well, I had my breakfast and I went in, got on the line, was there about 2 or 3 minutes, and I felt a tap on my shoulder. Step for step, I went exactly through the dream that I'd had. And I became an alignment person, and that was my job until I left.
Wow. Wow. How'd you get involved with Motorola? Weren't you one of the first in the emergency radios?
I had gone into business, and I was trying to sell an intercom system to a taxi cab company in Bay City. And they said, "Well, we don't want an intercom system. What we want is two-way radios." So I said, "Well, here's a guy that wants to buy something. I better find out where I can get it." I considered modifying some commercial or military equipment to do it, but decided that wasn't the route to go. So I called Motorola and told them that I had a prospect. They sent a salesman up. He sold the job, gave me the job of installing. And I did install them, and right after that he said, "We have another job down in Flint where there's about 30 or 40 radios to install. Would you be interested in doing that?" And I said, "I sure would." So I took that job, and from that point on they kept giving me more and more. I became one of the first authorized Motorola two-way radio stations in the nation.
Wow, wow.
I may well have been the first one that previously was not hired by some government entity, because I started in right on my own.
Wow. Outstanding. Well, how about Apple? You were first with them too, right?
Well,
among the first.
I was a audiovisual dealer. I had bought the Olson Anderson company and was an audiovisual dealer. And our major supplier was Bell and Howell. And when the first Apple computer came out, the Apple I and the Apple II, Bell and Howell made a deal with Apple to market that computer in the educational market. Now, whereas the commercial version was in a beige, the educational model was black. So we used to call it the black apple or the rotten apple. And we sold a lot of, actually we didn't sell them ourselves because the deal was that Apple would sell the computer to the school and then we would install it. When we finished installation, we'd have them sign off, and when we mailed that in to Apple, we got paid 15%. So we didn't have to tie our own money up into it at all. Apple billed for it and collected for it.
Wow, wow.
And at one time, we were by far the largest educational dealer in the state.
Now you met Steve Jobs, right?
Met who?
The founder of Apple, Steve.
Yes, I shook hands with Steve.
Wozniak?
No, not Wozniak.
Jobs.
Who's the other one?
Jobs? Jobs?
Yeah, Jobs. I shook his hand twice.
Wow.
Whose hand you shake?
Steve Jobs.
Oh, really? Well, that's worth something.
Well, you know, jumping around a little bit, but how did you get to Bay City?
When I was working at Zenith, there were 3 of us that Zenith sent to Bay City, assumably to learn about an automatic pilot that was being built by a Bay City company. At that time it was, I think, called Auto Lite.
Auto Lite.
Auto Lite, maybe it was Auto Lite.
Yeah.
Yeah. At any rate, they sent the 3 of us up there, and it turns out that the company wasn't building the automatic pilot. They were in a very early stage, and our first job had a bunch of women that were disassembling and reassembling alarm clocks to develop manual dexterity. We eventually did build the framework for the automatic pilot, and I don't think we turned out more than 100 of them at the time that I left. They did build another item that was called a turn indicator, basically a small gyroscope, and they did turn out hundreds or probably thousands of those.
Now, was my mother involved in that somehow?
Your mother was one of our people that I was supervising.
I got a story about that.
About my mom being involved in that?
When I had my first date with Ron, I had been roller skating, and Ron helped pick me up after the kids had played a stunt on me about loosening my new hard wheels on my new skates. And all of us fell, and Ron went, I was the last one getting picked up out of about 20. And so he, later on, we went uptown, Bay City, and Ron had an eye, I guess, on me, and he said, I work nights, but on Saturday night I'm off. Would you go to a movie with me? And I was so excited and went home and started telling him about this young man that I got a date with Saturday night, and I started telling him what he looked like. And Frida said, that's Wes Thorpe's mother, said, I sounds like Andy at Auto Lite. He's our boss. And then Vi Hallenmortz was living with us, and Vi said, yeah, that's Andy. So sure enough, when Ron picked me up and everything, and of course I got more dope on everything, and I was able to reaffirm that it was Ron that I had a date with, Ron Anderson.
Do you remember the first movie that you went to? That first movie?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember
the
what
movie,
you saw?
But I do remember one thing about it. We went to a drugstore in Bay City. I don't know the name of it, but on the way home, Ron said, oh, would you like, I thought we were going to get a chocolate sundae, and it didn't turn out to be a chocolate sundae at all, was it? It was a chocolate
It's a malted,
I think a malted that we got, but it wasn't a Sunday. For some reason, I thought that sounded really great, but I was happy no matter what. I don't think it would have made any difference.
So it'd be 60 plus years ago.
Oh, about 67.
67. Wow.
Now, we'll be married 65 in July, so.
Wow. Wow. I think I've got a picture of you that somebody took of you in your roller skating skirt.
Woo! Yeah.
Well, I could have scanned it. I'm not sure.
I carried that picture also in the military.